Welcome to the Good Mood Show. I'm your host, Matt O'Neill. Be sure to hit subscribe so that you get a good mood every week. Today, we are talking with Rob Schwartz. Rob is the son and editor of the new book, The Wisdom of Morrie, Living and Aging Creatively and Joyously. This book was written by Rob's late father, Morrie Schwartz, who is the beloved subject of the smash hit book, Tuesdays with Morrie, which sold 18 million copies, the top all-time memoir about the meaning of life. Rob, I'm so excited to have this conversation. Welcome to the Good Mood Show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
You know, and Rob offered a free gift to the first two people that reach out on our contact page, goodmoodshow.com. He's offering 2 physical copies to be mailed to you of his new book, The Wisdom of Morrie. And the way this book came to be is really interesting. Rob, can you kind of tell, I know you were telling me the story, but tell the story to our audience here about how this book even came to be.
Okay, I'll back up a little from what I told you already. My father wrote this book between 1988 and 1992 when he had retired from his university professorship at Brandeis. And I had been traveling around Asia. I was like a little pup then, and come back to the United States. And in the summer of '89, I lived at home, the last time I ever lived at home. I had the opportunity to talk to my father a lot about this book and his ideas and his writing it, and we had great conversations. Then I went off, he finished the book, but of course I was living in Japan. I moved to Japan, and a few years later, he got ill with ALS, which is where the Tuesdays with Morrie book starts, right? And then he passed away, and this book was forgotten. He had put it in a desk drawer. He had never published it, and it was forgotten. And years after his death, 8 years or so after his death, I rediscovered it in his desk drawer. And, you know, it was like finding a diamond in the bottom of a pile of rags or something like that. And as soon as I opened it up, it was big, bound with a black cover, a hard black cover. I knew exactly what it was because I had talked to him so much about it. And I thought, like, wow, we should probably publish this. After the success of Tuesdays with Morrie, we have an opportunity to finally get this book out there.
Yeah, and I've read the book, and it is awesome. Tuesdays with Morrie is one of my top all-time favorite books.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I read it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of your father's. His wisdom has had a big influence on my life personally. One of the things that really helped me in my 20s when I was reading this book was the idea of forgiveness.
Yes.
And I know that's a topic of his book. And, you know, this weekend I watched the movie Tuesdays with Morrie.
Right.
I didn't even know there was a movie.
Oh yeah. I mean,
you're in it, Rob. You're in the movie.
Well, briefly, and not me, of course, an actor playing me. But there's a lot to say about the movie. We can take a little detour to that as well. The book is fairly true to life. There may be 1 or 2 tiny things that are not exactly factually correct, but the movie is quite fictional, right?
Okay.
It was a made-for-TV movie. The way it came about is actually the same way that Tuesdays with Morrie became a smash hit. Mitch released Tuesdays with Morrie, and it wasn't a hit. It wasn't on any bestseller list, and one person got a hold of it. And
Oprah.
yeah, you know the story, Oprah.
Yeah.
She was so excited about it. She had Mitch on her show. She put it on her Book of the Month club. It skyrocketed to #1. And at the same time, brilliant Oprah bought the rights for the movie, for the TV movie. So that's how the movie came about. And the TV producers, you know, they added a lot of fictionalization. They made Mitch having problems at work. He never was having problems at work. They made Mitch not sure whether he should marry his girlfriend. They were already married when he came back and met my father.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of fiction going on in the movie.
But it was a really great story with him having the decision or not about it, and how Morrie really had an impact on his marriage. But Morrie had a huge impact on his life. And,
absolutely.
You know, I listened to Oprah's podcast when she had Mitch on the podcast. And one of the questions that really struck me, again, going back to forgiveness, she asked Mitch, hey, did Morrie ever say if he had any regrets? And Mitch said, yeah, one day I asked him about that, and he had tears in his eyes, and he got really choked up. There was a guy he had turned cold towards, who had turned cold towards him, and they didn't reconcile. And this guy passed away before Morrie had a chance to forgive him. Um, did he ever talk about forgiveness being a big pillar of how to lead an exceptional life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Both the topics that you just touched on, forgiveness, and in fact, in the Wisdom of Morrie, as you probably know, since you just read it, he has a big section on regret and how to deal with the feelings of regret and how to turn it positive, how to take it and work with it. That's basically the overall technique of this book, not the specific technique, but the overall technique is how to take something that you find challenging and work with it. Obviously, the overall thing is aging, getting older. Nobody wants to get older and weaker and whatever, but you take that and you work with it and you make it something positive. And that's what this book is about, and offers lots of techniques and ideas to do that.
Yeah, he describes the top 5 secrets to living a long and happy life. And one of those secrets is strengthening human relationships.
Right.
The book talks a lot about strengthening human relationships. What's important about this? Why is this so important?
Well, for my father, it was basically the most important thing in life was your relationships and the time you spend with the people close to you, the people who you love, who love you. I mean, we all say that it doesn't get any better than this when you're with somebody that you love. I mean, you're a dad, so there's no experience like raising children and that, complete love that you have for them and they have for you. There's no feeling like that. There's really nothing like it in the world. And you can expand that to everything, to your friends, your family, everything. If you can feel that love for those people and feel it from those people, well, it doesn't really get any better than that. And my father really focuses on that because we all know that, but we tend to forget it or ignore it or say, I'll do it later, or they make you angry. People can make you angry, and that gets in the way of really what's important, which is sharing quality time, loving those people, having them love you.
Yeah, and there was a quote from the movie that that stuck with me a lot, and it was, you don't know how to live until you learn how to die. And I've been thinking about that quote a lot. And to me, what that quote says is that once you understand that you're going to die, that this life is going to be over, or that the life of those people that we care about is going to be over, now we can come back and live and appreciate that we're alive and they're alive.
Right. You nailed it. I don't even have to say anything. You nailed it. That's exactly right. Because, I mean, a lot of thinkers have said this, not only my father, but of course he keys on it as well. We all know we're going to die. He also said this. We all know we're going to die, and no one believes it, which means that we all just pretend it doesn't exist. But if you really accept it and think about it, then you realize how precious life is, and you'll forget all these like petty things that happen. We let all these petty things get in the way of our life. Oh, that person didn't, say the right thing. They didn't exactly understand what I was trying to say. It pisses us off and it ruins our day. It's like, why? It's so unimportant. What's really unimportant is, as we already said, living, loving, having great experiences with the people in your life. If you can do that, the tiny things disappear,
I think I remember a portion from from the Tuesdays with Morrie book, where when he had ALS, he got to the point where he couldn't go outside anymore. But he would lay in his bed in the living room and look out the window at the tree. And he just, the looking at a tree brought him so much joy.
Right. Yeah.
Why is that? Why can someone laying in a bed, in the last year of their life find so much joy just looking at a tree?
Right. I mean, in one way, it's easy to answer that question. Another way, it's really, really difficult to answer the question. The easy answer is that, my father really appreciated beauty. And it's the same thing that we've just sort of touched on. If you can appreciate life and all the joy and love that it's brought you, then your specific circumstance in that second doesn't matter. You have an overall appreciation of life and love and the people in your life. But really getting to that state is so difficult. You know, our attention is constantly shifting, especially in the society we live in today, of whatever it is, email, text, you know, Instagram, social media, TV, this person is doing this person is honking their horn at us, driving is such a hassle. I mean, you live in Charleston, so maybe it's not so bad in Charleston, but a lot of major cities in this country, driving is such a hassle, people cutting you off. You get angry so easily, and that's basically a distraction from what's important in life, right?
Yeah, like just the beauty of the sunshine, of the blue sky, of an incredible maple tree. This, just to be alive is such a gift. And so what Morrie has really taught us, and he's talking in the Wisdom of Morrie about aging gracefully, is that your life is precious, and wake up to that. So every day I do this practice. I pick one person and I write in my journal, I say, my heart is overflowing with love for, and it could be my daughter, Harper.
Right.
And every day I picture that one person that I write down not being here, the passing away.
Wow.
You know, she's only 9.
Wow.
But and some days I'm just bawling. Like I'll picture walking into a room and her room being empty weeks after she's already passed.
Wow.
And what I'm doing is I'm coming back to the present moment without this taking for granted thing that we're all going to live forever.
Right. Right.
So, and I do this intentionally every single day to bring myself back to the beauty of being alive and the beauty of my loved ones being alive. And that's why I love this movie. That's why I love this book. That's why I love the work that you're doing out there.
Let me just comment on that for a second, because that's incredible. I mean, that's amazing. I was about to say that's fantastic when you just said, you know, my heart is overflowing with love. But if you can go to that dark, what is more of a, you know, life-wrecking tragedy for a parent than losing a child, especially a young child? And if you can go there intentionally to remind yourself of how beautiful and precious life is and your child is and it all is, that's incredible. It's incredibly strong. I think that most people could just do the first part and be happy with that. My heart is overflowing with love for the people in my life. I have a hard time thinking about the people that I love passing away. You know, if they're not children. I don't have any children.
We all do. We all have a hard time thinking about it. And yet it can bring us into how special today is, so that we don't get annoyed by the traffic, or if we do, we can say no big deal today.
Right.
You know, in the book, your father talks about staying human. What does it mean to stay human? What does he mean by that?
Right. That's a great question. I think it's very related to the things that we've talked about already. For my father, it's staying true to the things that make us human. And they are the things that we've talked about: loving people in your life, enjoying beauty. I think it's a very human thing to enjoy beauty. You know, I don't think that animals look at a blue sky and go like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Now, animals exist in a very different way than us, but I really think that appreciating beauty, that's a really human thing. I mean, it seems abstract, stay human, but if you think about it, it's not so abstract. What do humans have that other things don't have? Appreciate beauty, understand the people who love you, and appreciate them both emotionally, but also in a thinking way, also in a psychological way. Understand how precious and lucky we are to have that in our life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that you said appreciating beauty. He loved to dance too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I would extend it: appreciating beauty and appreciating joy. And dance is really just expressing your joy with your body, jumping around, right? And my father loved to dance. Yeah, when he lost the ability to dance because of ALS, it was very, very sad. But concentrating on the good, he loved to dance. And that was a big, even when he was in his 60s and even in his 70s.
He was still dancing.
Yes, yes.
In chapter 2 of the book, it starts out with a quote from Morrie's high school French teacher, where in French, she asked him the question, what's the most beautiful time in life? And his answer was now.
Right.
Why would he say in his late 60s, early 70s that was the most beautiful time of his life?
Right. So there's two answers to that. And he also talked to Mitch about this. So it's funny because this is a real point of connection between the two books. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of philosophical ideas that are similar, but this is a point of immediate connection. So one reason would be, and this is what he explained to Mitch, at this age, he has so much knowledge and understanding of life that he can appreciate it so much more. When you're a young man, you're distracted by so many things, particularly in this country, success, building your career, making money. But when you're older, you have much more perspective and can put everything in the proper balance. So that's one of the reasons why, when you're aging, it's the most beautiful time of life. But philosophically, and, my father was very spiritual, and we can talk about that, whatever that means to our listener. He was spiritual. He didn't necessarily follow any organized religion, but a spiritual concept is that, it's always now. The past and the future don't exist. So the most beautiful time in life has to be now because it's the only time. And if you can really understand and live in that concept, that now is really the only time, you've made spiritual progress. That is a spiritual idea that is not easy to grasp and live, right? We're always living in the past and the future, and it doesn't really benefit us to do so.
Yeah, that was the context I was taking away from it, was that now is the only time I can experience. So now is the most beautiful time of my life.
Exactly.
And to have any other thought that, oh no, the most beautiful time of my life was in my 30s. Well, that's a suffering thought.
Exactly.
Because I can't go back there anyway.
Exactly.
And how do I even know if that was really the most beautiful time compared to now? Now is the only time we can experience. Yeah, I'm actually rereading Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
There you go.
Just
so
because,
you sound like a very spiritual person, actually.
Oh, I'm highly spiritual and more along the lines of Morrie. And so that's why this book really resonated with me as well. And he talks so much about spirituality throughout this book.
Yes.
And one of the things he says is being in the world, but also being in the spiritual world.
Right.
That's a part of the book.
Right.
What does that mean? How can we be in the world, but also be in the spiritual world?
Well, I think it relates to exactly all the things that we've touched on. I mean, you want to be in this world in that you relate to it. You're also involved. I mean, this book also talks about, as I'm sure you remember, being involved with your community, doing work that benefits other people, especially people who need the help. That's extremely important to my father. And he talks about that in the book. So that's being in the world. But being in the spiritual world is this understanding that life is incredibly precious, incredibly beautiful. And in some sense, that takes you out of the specific time and puts you in this general life, just living in the moment, right? And that's also a Zen idea and a meditation idea that my father very much, he talks about in the book, and very much experienced the last few years of his life. When you meditate, you're just immediately in that moment because you're trying to wash away all thought and just breathe, just be. And it's really, really hard, right? People,
it is.
Oh, that's ridiculous. It's really hard. And when you do it, you understand the value of it.
I meditate every morning.
There you go.
And it's a practice. I've gotten better at it. Like you just alluded to, you think it's kind of silly to be able to just sit there and not think, or it's kind of boring, right? As I've dove deeper and deeper and deeper into a meditation practice, the more I see I can go, like the further I can go into connecting with my breath and being in the present and connecting to this moment.
Wow.
My favorite part of the whole book was the last chapter, and the becoming the best person you can be. And Morrie uses a Yiddish word, mensch.
Yes.
What does mensch mean?
Wow. All right. Well, now I'm speaking, on something that's extremely important in Jewish culture. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'll do my best. I mean, just basically, mensch means a good person. Mensch means a good person. Another way to look at it is a morally upright person, somebody who wouldn't take advantage of somebody weaker or be cruel to somebody, something like that. That's a mensch, a person who really has strong moral fiber. But in a wider sense, a mensch is a person who does good things in their community. Obviously, it treats their family members well, treats all the people in their life well, but is also somebody in the community that everybody respects and does good work and tries to help people. So it has many, many different meanings, but I think those are the basic three, let's say.
Yeah, I love this whole concept. And he described somebody with mensch in the book, Alice, at age 86.
Right.
And some of the words he used about her were gentle, strong, and a compassionate human being.
Right.
That she was present and she gave her undivided attention to people when she was with them. And that people that she was with always felt that they were worthwhile in her presence and that they were special to her.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good definition of mensch right there. I should say, because you read a story of a woman, people who know German will know that mensch means man, literally means man, but it doesn't have to be a male. I mean, a woman can be a mensch, as you just read the story, and that's a perfect example of a mensch, someone who is fully involved with the people around them, is not distracted or has some ego getting in the way or something like that. And compassion was extremely important for my father. And as you're well aware, since you read the book, a big part of The Wisdom of Morrie, also a big part of Tuesdays with Morrie.
Absolutely. Yeah. And why I'm so into this idea of high moral character is that I do think it's the secret to happiness. This is the Good Mood Show. A Thich Nhat Hanh quote recently that I read was, anything you do that is wholesome leads to good feelings.
Yeah.
Anything that you do is unwholesome leads to suffering. And this to me is mensch.
Yeah.
Is that
absolutely.
Are my thoughts unwholesome? If I have an unwholesome thought, it could be a craving or a desire in an unwholesome way. That would be an unwholesome thought. Well, that's going to lead to suffering. Or is my thought unwholesome about this person? Am I wishing them ill? Do I want revenge? Am I angry at them? Well, any of those unwholesome thoughts will lead me to suffering. But then the other side of it is, you're not a do-gooder. You're not this goody two-shoes that's always doing good just because it's the right thing to do. You're actually doing it because it makes you feel freaking awesome.
Right.
When I'm somebody of high moral character who cares about others, who's compassionate, who's gentle, who's understanding, who does the right thing, that leads to happiness.
Right. There's two things. I mean, you're getting pretty philosophical here, and I love it. I studied philosophy in university. So I think that there's two different strands there, but they both end up in the same place. You do the right thing because it makes you feel awesome, but you do the right thing also because you have empathy for the other person and you can put yourself in their place. So that's different than making yourself feel good. That's a kind of connection with humanity. And they're both important. It's not like I'm emphasizing one over the other, but they both lead you to do the right thing. And they're both extremely important in life. I mean, empathy is crucial in my father's view.
Yeah, just one way you could sacrifice. Like, yeah, I'll do this nice thing, but I won't like it because it's gonna put me out of my way.
Right.
Like if I do this for you, it's a sacrifice on me, but it's to help you out. Well, that doesn't feel good.
Right.
It's more we need to serve with an open heart and understand that as we serve others, we're serving ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
then I can feel good about it's not even a sacrifice. It's like,
right.
Oh no, doing this nice thing makes me feel good.
Right. Absolutely.
We both get to feel good about it.
Right.
One of the things that I remember from Tuesdays with Morrie was death ends a life, but not a relationship. What does that mean?
Right. I mean, that's one of the quotes from Tuesdays with Morrie, as you can imagine, that had the most profound effect on me, because my father's life ended, but the relationship did not end. And when he said that, of course, he said it while he was alive. And I realized immediately, it's one of those things that you realize immediately is true. You never think about it, but when somebody says it, you realize immediately that it's true, that you have a relationship with a person, and when they die, that relationship doesn't end. You still think about them. You still have all those feelings about them. You still want to relate to those feelings, but the person, the physical person, is not there. Obviously, I think about my father all the time. I think about the things that he taught me. I go to his gravesite. I think, how would he have interpreted this situation? What advice would he have given me? That's a relationship. I have a relationship with him, but he's not physically here. And he really emphasized that. He said, come to my grave. The famous story with Mitch is, come to my grave and talk to me. And Mitch says, you won't be able to answer back. And he's like, you talk, I'll listen,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's wonderful, and I go to his grave all the time. I actually live right now quite close to where his grave is.
And do you get some clarity when you ask him questions?
Certainly there's, complicated things that you have to think about carefully, analyze or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it helps. It helps to think about how my father would have approached it. I can put myself in his mindset to a certain extent.
In that, another quote he had said is, love is how you stay alive even after you're gone. And I
Right.
think that's what you're talking about here.
Right.
Is that if you really love people and you give them all this compassion and this empathy, you give everything you've got to them, that even after you're gone, your memory is still with them, and your memory still stays alive with them.
That's absolutely right. And not only your memory, I mean, that's one part of it, but your deeds. I mean, if you put yourself into somebody else's heart and you really affect them to be more loving and more compassionate, then that compassion and love that they express in the world is being, is part of you. Is that something that you're continuing to have an experience, not an experience, but an effect on the world?
Yeah. One of my buddies, this guy named Matt Micheletti, was coaching me a couple of years ago. And he said something. I made him stop and go back and say it again. He said, I only spend my time on eternal things.
Wow.
And I said, wait a minute. What are eternal things? And he said, well, I think anything that's not eternal is no longer worth my time. And I'm like, tell me more. Like, this sounds pretty fascinating. And he said, making an impact in other people's lives is truly the only eternal thing.
Right.
Because as you just said, if I pour my heart out to somebody and I help them become a more loving person, their whole life has changed, and then they might change somebody who might change somebody, and the ripples through time never stop. It's eternal.
Exactly. That's exactly what my father was talking about. You nailed it on the head.
Otherwise, we spend our my time just making money. Like, let me do this thing for my selfish reason.
Right. Or, being unhappy or enjoying very fleeting pleasures, or just flitting around from one thing to the next. I think that's the way most people are. Their attention just flits around from one thing to the next. And even if they're enjoying something, sometimes they leave it behind and go do something else, because that's kind of how our society is. It's so fast paced these days. Things are just being shot at you at a rate of 1,000 things per second, so people get confused. And yeah, I think it's really important to focus on these things you're talking about.
And me too. I need to slow down and be with the people I'm with. Here we are having this beautiful conversation. I want to be having a beautiful conversation where I'm all in with every person I'm with, the way that Morrie was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And on the other hand, so I'll just put this in there. My father also talked about the tension of opposites and how everything is sort of a paradox, right? So what you said is beautiful and true, but on the other hand, I mean, maybe it's more like you just need to exist in that space of love, whether you need to, be super involved in somebody's life or something like that. And that's the tension. of just existing in a certain way, but on the other hand, being super active and super involved in things that are good for you and your family and the community. You know, there's a tension there, you know, not that that's a bad thing, but yeah.
Yeah, the tension of opposites was really an interesting take on life that he had.
Exactly.
And one of the opposites that I really keyed in on was this time of solitude versus time of connection.
Yeah, precisely.
And he talked a lot about why we need solitude and connection. But
Right.
the pendulum can swing too far one way or the other.
Absolutely. And it's not that you exist in one all the time. It's always going back and forth. And that's what the tension and the you know, connection between the opposites is. And I think we do need solitude to reflect, think about what we did, think about how we could do it better. And that's a big part of the wisdom of Morrie is reflection on how maybe we can do things better. Earlier I mentioned he talks a lot about regret. That's exactly what it is. Regret is something where we wish we had done something different in the past. So he takes that and he says, okay, you don't want to have that feeling. Let's think about how we could have done things different in the past and how it'll affect our actions in the future, how we can use this to do better in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just don't want to dwell there too long, but
Okay.
that's where part of this meditation comes from.
Sure.
Too,
Sure.
because I totally agree. When I'm feeling regret, that can be useful if I can extract the lesson. Say,
Right.
okay, well, I'm feeling this feeling of regret. It feels super uncomfortable. I don't like it. I don't like feeling that I messed up in some way. What could I have done better? What decision will I make to do better in the future? And then now I need to stop ruminating about it.
Absolutely.
I've got to let it go. It's in the past. I can no longer influence what happened there. I can influence what will happen next. But how do we get out of the rumination?
Well, that's exactly what my father says, is you don't hold on to it too long. You think about it, you take what's valuable from it, and then you let it go. In fact, it's not very well known, but before Tuesdays with Morrie, my father wrote a little book about his ideas, and it has all these short ideas like the ones that you've mentioned, learn how to live by learning how to die, and all those sort of things. And the original title of that book, remember, it was published while he was still alive, while he was ill, before Tuesdays with Morrie, and the original title of that book is Letting Go. So, you know, that's part of it. And so certain things that don't serve you, you just have to let go. That doesn't mean, you know, you're going to treat people poorly or take advantage of them. No, you're going to take the lessons from the things that made you feel bad and apply them in your life to do better, to be a better person. But letting go of stuff is very, very important. People tend to hold on to it and it drags them down, you know. How to let go of it?
How do we let go, especially if our mind doesn't want to set it down?
Well, this is the exact topic that we were talking about before to a certain extent, which is forgiveness. And in this case, it's forgiveness of yourself. And my father would say that we all have to recognize he said this a lot, we're simply human beings. We're not perfect, immortal gods. We make mistakes all the time, and you have to forgive yourself for making those mistakes. You have to forgive other people for mistreating you, doing, you know, things that you thought were wrong, but you have to forgive yourself. If you're not able to employ forgiveness, you may not have a very happy life. And that's a problem, you know, that is what we're aiming for, to have a happy life. Forgiveness is crucial because we are not perfect beings. We're going to make mistakes. That is going to happen. And you need to accept that we're going to make mistakes, and you need to forgive yourself for making mistakes. You need to forgive other people.
I was just talking with my mom this weekend. We're reading A Course in Miracles.
Nice.
And in A Course in Miracles, I said, you know, the whole crux of this 365-day program is forgiveness. And in the Course in Miracles, it says your function, the reason you're here, the reason you're alive, is to forgive. And I was just talking with her about this. I said, so I'm like, so if our reason of existence is to learn how to forgive, then that means people have to do things that we need to forgive.
Yes,
So we
exactly.
should probably be kind of excited when somebody does something we need to forgive, because then we get to fulfill our function.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, I'm not sure I would go fully down that road, but I do want to say, it sounds, first of all, like you have a really great relationship with your mother, which is
I
fantastic.
do, yeah.
But I think, which is wonderful, and I'm very, very happy. But I think that the forgiveness is crucial, particularly in this relationship. People who are unhappy tend to be very unhappy with their parents. And, parents, generally 99% of them, they're doing the best that they can. They make a huge number of mistakes, and the kids, lots and lots of people out there are so angry at their parents. They screwed me up. They did this wrong. They didn't do it on purpose, right? They just did the best that they could. And if you recognize that and are able to forgive your parents, that is a huge step, I think, in development of your personality, because as you know, childhood and your parents, the way your parents raised you, are so important in creating who you are as a human being.
And, he talked about letting go of noxious relationships.
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
and so part of this letting go is so we can forgive someone who's not good for us. But then he also said, you don't have to hang on to the relationship. So sometimes there's, and sometimes there's a family member, it could be a parent, who we don't necessarily have to say, I'm going to cut you off and never talk to you again, but full forgiveness. I see you did the best you could, but when I go close to you, you still continue to hurt me. So I have to approach this relationship with discernment.
Yes.
With some protection for myself. That's my relationship with my father.
Okay, absolutely. I agree 100%. And my father does say that in the book as well. Exactly. And this is also a big theme, I think, in American culture today: toxic relationships. If someone is toxic, you have to keep them at arm's length. Like you said, you need to protect yourself. You can forgive them, you can offer them love, but that doesn't mean you have to draw them close, right? You can keep them at arm's length and say, I wish you the best. You have all my love from this distance, because I'm not going to let you hurt me. I'm not going to let you bring your toxic world into my world. That is more than reasonable. That's necessary and important. Absolutely. And there's some people you can't change. You can't help with your love, and you need to recognize that, keep them at arm's length, and move on. I'm sorry to hear that it's your father. That's sad, but
Well, we have the best relationship we've ever had.
Good.
Now. And it's been books like this, forgiveness. That's why 20 years ago, when I read Tuesdays with Morrie, and he talks so much about forgiveness in that book, it had such a big impact on me. Because as I forgave and as I started to see that he was doing the very best that he could, that if he could have done better, he would have.
Right.
And that he's not a perfect human being, and neither am I. Right? Like I'm not a perfect father. I don't do every single thing right.
I have a feeling you're a pretty good father. I just get that feeling.
I really want to be a great father. So because that's the thing, is that I'm like, man, that was why it was hard to forgive at first. Was why didn't you want to be a great father? I just couldn't understand it. Why wouldn't you want to?
Right.
And then I just started to see that, he didn't like himself.
Right.
And so if he didn't like himself first, then how could he like me?
Right. I think there's two things there. I mean, you're a bit younger than me, but still, I think this idea of all this personal development, this has come into our culture pretty recently. I think, in the past, we didn't really have this idea of how to grow personally. So people just were who they were and were developed by their parents who, grew up in a totally different time where people didn't have all these ideas of psychological development and personal growth and all that sort of stuff. So it's a hangover from that time. I mean, in some ways, our society has gotten screwed up, but in some ways, we've made a lot of progress,
I always think we're making progress. I just do. I think consciousness is continuing to evolve. that was how I ended up forgiving. Was I traced it back to his parents.
Exactly.
And they had ridiculously hard lives, like
Right.
crazy hard lives. My
Right.
my grandfather was an orphan on the streets of New York.
Wow.
Both his parents died when he was a young boy,
Wow.
and it was tough. It was the early 1900s. He just was,
Wow.
he lived a hard, scrappy life, right? Then
Wow.
he took his dead older brother's passport and or birth certificate and got into the army at age 16, saying
Wow.
he was 18 just so he could get off the streets. And so
Wow.
that's my grandfather. That's who raised my dad, was this dude that said life sucks and I'm going to beat the shit out of you so you know how tough it is. And then my dad went to Vietnam, and
Wow.
he had a pretty tough time in Vietnam. And
Wow.
then he comes home and yeah, there's no self-help books. It's, hey, my dad raised me like this. I'm raising you like this. This is how
Right.
it works, right?
Right.
And so if he had known how to be a better dad, but he didn't have a good role model for that, he would have
Right.
done it, but he
But
didn't.
also, I mean, you said something that's really, I mean, that trauma of Vietnam, that whole trauma for the people and for our country, right? As you know, Vietnam vets were the first vets who came back from a war and people were not happy with them.
They booed him.
People were angry at them, which
Yeah,
is crazy,
right.
insane, but that's what happened because that war was so bitter, right? I'm sure that your father is traumatized from that. I can't imagine that he's not.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it changed him. And so then there's compassion there too, right? So then
Yeah.
after all of this forgiveness with my dad, now we have the strongest relationship we've ever had. It's not that he's a cool person. He wasn't Morrie.
Right.
But he had a tough life, man.
Yeah, exactly.
He had a super tough life. And so there were a lot of good times when I was a kid. I kind of blocked out.
Right.
And then coming back to compassion and seeing he was doing the best he could, I started to remember the good times. And now we talk about like, hey, I remember when you used to take me fishing.
Right.
And I remember you taught me how to ride my bike. I remember
Right.
that we would go to Tigers baseball games. I grew up in Detroit, and so like he did a lot of good things. I just, when you get so focused in on you weren't who I wanted you to be, you forget that there were good times too.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Also, I mean, this is a little spin on it, but I think you'll appreciate it. It gave you an opportunity to grow. That tough time gave you an opportunity to grow.
Dude,
So
there wouldn't be a good mood
positive
show
way to
right
look at
now.
it.
Right?
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a good mood show right now if I didn't
Right.
need all the work.
Exactly.
And now I get to pay it back with this, with this show, and having you on the show has just been a total blessing, and what an honor. If you guys love this conversation, again, the first two people reach out on the contact page, we're going to send you a physical copy. We'll mail it you. So go to the contact page, say, I want the book Wisdoms with Morrie, and put your address, and we'll mail you a copy of the book. The first two people. If you're not the first two people, I highly recommend go on Amazon, get Wisdom with Morrie. It's an awesome book by Rob Schwartz and Morrie Schwartz. Rob, there's going to be people that want to learn more from you. How could people get in touch or learn more?
Absolutely. So I have a website up. It's wisdomofmorrie.com. So very easy, wisdomofmorrie.com. Anybody writes to me on that website, I will write back immediately. I'm really eager to go around the country and talk about the book. If people want to have events, that's easily doable. And if people just have questions for me, then we'll certainly be glad to respond to those. There's a lot of resources on the website as well, lots of interviews that I've done, TV spots, longer stuff. So, there's a lot of information out there, and certainly people are more than welcome to reach out to me directly. Wisdomofmorrie.com. And the book, as you said, it's The Wisdom of Morrie, Living Creatively and Joyfully, Living and Aging Creatively and Joyfully. And that's one thing I want to emphasize. In some ways, this book is about aging, but as we've talked about, this book is really about living. And I think everybody can benefit from it of any age. It'll have advice in there on how to live a more creative, vibrant, loving life.
Absolutely. And you're coming to Charleston.
I am coming to Charleston. That the date in Charleston is not completely nailed down, but it'll probably be the first week of November. The date for Hilton Head, which I assume is not that far from Charleston.
No, it's only a couple hours. Yeah.
Right, is the 5th of November, but I'm not sure if that one is open to the public or not, but there'll be a public event in Charleston. Yeah. Yeah. And I
Great.
have to say, yeah, you're from Detroit, so that's the same city that Mitch is in. So you have that
Yeah.
connection. with
No,
Tuesday morning.
yeah, I mean, of course. I read his sports articles growing up.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Mitch is a really cool guy. He does a
Yeah.
lot of cool stuff with charity too.
Now, well, I want to mention it because he does an amazing thing. I mean, I shouldn't say, but it seems like it's directly influenced by his experience with my dad. I think he would say that he started an orphanage in Haiti. And as some people may know, Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and their kids there really need help. So if you want to do something great, you can find Mitch's orphanage in Haiti. I don't have the website on top of my mind, but you can easily find it. And the orphanage is struggling. If you can donate to that, it would be a fantastic thing. Mitch does incredible work with it. He wrote a whole book about bringing a Haitian orphan into his family, one who was very ill. It's called Finding Chica, and you may be familiar with it. It's also a tragic story, but he wrote a beautiful book about it. But I would strongly urge people to help Mitch with his orphanage in Haiti. Yeah.
Rob, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. It's not just the wisdom of Morrie, it's also the wisdom of Rob.
That's very sweet of you to say.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Good stuff.